Welcome to episode 52 of A Tonic for Lunacy. In today's episode, I am going to play you a pre recorded, what I am calling a shadow sermon, a little shadow, I don't even want to say class. It was like me sharing my current pivot, sharing my process, what human design looks like in real life, and how it can help you get everything that you want. So stay tuned. Here it is. Okay. So my idea for this little podcast recording is to explain some of the process of one, pivoting, and two, it the deconditioning process, right? Like someone asked me not that long ago, does it ever end? Like, do we ever stop deconditioning? Do we ever stop doing the shadow work? And the truth is no. But I think that it becomes easier and it becomes kind of like a shift in the moment where you're like, oh shit, I just recognize that I am operating from the not self. So I'm going to make this tiny little switch, which is the shadow work, right? That is the deconditioning work. There, you've done it and it's done. So what I'm hoping to convey today is just a little bit of my recent process and some things that I have witnessed that will hopefully make your process easier at any point in time. So I would love to also take questions at the end if anyone has things they want to ask. I'm going to do this a little bit differently. So I typically riff on my story, on my process, on who said, she said, who did, and how I messed everything up and then put it all back together. And I will be doing that as well. But I'm also going to start with a little story. So I'm going to read you guys a little story. So the popcorn is out. I'm so glad Suzanne's ready. I could not have planned that better. Okay. Um, story here. Does anybody have any questions before we start? We're good? Okay, cool. All right. Day after day, she prayed. Down on her knees, no matter the surface, she sank. She prayed for clarity. She asked for God to show her the way. She asked God why. Why did life feel so hard? Why was she so tired, frustrated, and alone, even after all of these years? She had followed the rules, every single one. As a child, she was always a good girl. She was quiet and never asked for anything. She wasn't too much. She did her homework and she helped around the house. She ignored the arguing and she steered clear when the bottles started to mount and the hands started to fly. She hugged her brother and soothed him to sleep like a good girl who would also be a good mother one day. She went to school and got a good job and married a man who was just right. She had two kids and even a dog with spots on her back. She was the perfect clone of her mother. She had done it all right, she thought. So why did the frustration and the sadness, the restlessness for something else keep creeping in? That was why she found herself in that tiny chapel every single Wednesday for the last 7 years. First, she prayed for energy, to be a good mother, even when she desperately needed rest and more support. She prayed for compassion, to be a good wife, for her anger got the best of her when her husband turned out to be just like her father. She prayed for the purpose, to be a good person, when she was anxious and depressed. She prayed for patience, to be that good girl again when her parents grew old and needed her. She always prayed to hear her intuition, to hear God, to know what to do, for clarity on being good, on how to be good enough. It wasn't a particularly remarkable day, the day it finally happened. It was just another Wednesday. The sky was dark with ballooning clouds ready to explode. Her eyes filled, ready to explode herself, when she finally heard from God or her intuition, when it all finally became clear. And the message was, stop trying to be good. You were never meant to be a good girl living a small, predictable life, but rather an incredible woman living an extraordinary life. I gave you frustration to notice what was not you. I gave you restlessness and anxiety to make you move. I gave you boredom so you could hear your own truth. I let you replay your past to heal and release it. Everything was for you to recognize who you really are and who you are not. The moral of the story is that our bodies know the information is there, but often we are simply too afraid to move. We try to be good, good enough by following other people's expectations, but it never actually works the way that we want it to. Who can relate to that in one way or another? Right? We think all we have to do is just be good enough and it's all going to get figured out and it's all going to make sense and it's all going to work out. But in reality, we have these pains, these aches, these frustrations, these niggling, nagging feelings within our bodies that are constantly telling us something is wrong, something is off, something is not working, this isn't right for you. And I find, maybe it's my third line, that I spend lots of time playing here, but maybe I can make myself fit, but maybe I can somehow make it work. And when I think about all of the energy that I spend trying to make myself fit into this box that is good enough, I'm like, holy shit, I could have used that energy to write an entire book at this point, right? So what I have learned over the past few weeks is that hardly ever is this energy lying to us. But we have been so conditioned to not trust our bodies, and we've been so conditioned to not trust those feelings and to keep pushing them aside because somebody needs something, or because society told me it should be this way, or because my mom always wanted this for me. So we push all of these things aside. This can't be real. This can't be true. I cannot trust myself. I cannot trust my body. And then we wonder why we're so disconnected from all of that. So my process over the past few weeks has been, so we did, let me start at the beginning. We did, if you caught my, I think it was 2 episodes ago or 1 episode ago, the podcast on family mapping. So what I did was shadow mapping on our family. If we take our parents' bodygraphs, our caregivers, our grandparents, whoever, and we look at each one separately, what does this tell us about who this person is? And how does that affect us? So I did a special addition to the shadow report where I went through a process for deconditioning and doing the shadow work using family mapping. And my hypothetical situation for that, which was not really hypothetical, was that I wanted to create consistent $20,000 months of passive income from my shadow report. You all probably already know the shadow report. So this was kind of like a goal that I created, that I had. So I started looking at the family mapping, and I was like, okay, well, I understand why I might have this issue with money. I understand why I might have this issue with needing to work harder or being deserving of it or feeling worthy enough, right? Like I could see it in my parents' charts, and knowing them, obviously, and knowing me, I could see how that had translated to me. I could see the beliefs and the values that my parents held around money, self-worth, work, life, and how I inherited that. And that's the power of family shadow mapping, right? We can see all of these things clearly. It gets complicated, of course, and it requires a lot of contemplation. And lucky for us, when we start doing the shadow work, that shit shows up in our environment and we see it right in front of us. So I knew that my mom was a spender and she proved it. I knew my dad was a hard worker and he proved it. And I knew that money came quickly and then also left quickly. So there was this holding, right? That this tension, holding of this tension that was just not happening. So I knew that I wanted something different, right? I knew that I wanted, one, for money to stay, and two, I didn't want to work hard. I didn't want to work as hard, right? My nervous system was taxed, and naturally I wanted to do less so that I could focus on other things, right? So I focused on marketing. I focused on Instagram, on making reels. And I started to notice, I started following those Instagram marketers. And I started to notice that they make it sound so easy, right? So I did a little research on them and like how they got started and like scroll to the bottom of their feed, right? I'm like, what is this all about? And it sounded easy. I just have to make reels, right? Like I just have to make a lot of reels. I trust my product. I love my fucking product. The Shadow Report is the bomb. And I just have to make reels. And so for the next, I think I started this around maybe August. I think the entire month of August, I created 2 reels every single day, which is a lot of annoying work. And it wasn't getting much traction. And then I started doing it again and it wasn't getting much traction. And I found myself getting really frustrated with this. And I'm like, okay, well, let me go back to the shadow work, right? Let me go back to the family mapping. And like, how else am I fucked up? How else did my parents screw me up? And there was a moment of realization in that where I noticed that I was going from one system of conditioning, my parents, work harder doesn't count, to another one of make $1 million in passive income in one day from your bathtub while you're sipping champagne, right? From those Instagram influencers. And I noticed that those two were not different, right? It was the same thing. And it was both me being conditioned, allowing it, rightfully so, right? My undefined mind being conditioned from all these different places about what I should want and how I should create it. And I recognized it because when I started going on Instagram, I didn't feel good. Like it started to feel bad. And when I was making my reels, I started to get really frustrated. And I'm like, this isn't working. Something's not working. And that's, I think, the key. And I think I came into one of the Voxer groups and talked to you guys about it, where I was like, sometimes you have to just stop and ask yourself, is this actually working? And do I even want it to work? So I realized, no, something here wasn't working. I had done the shadow work, I'd done the mapping. Like I could honestly say there was nothing about me that needed to be fixing. Can my marketing be better? I don't know. And honestly, I don't care. Like I love putting out educational posts. I love it. I love teaching. I love showing you guys a part of the body graph that you maybe didn't consider in this way before. That is what I loved. I didn't necessarily love putting lipstick on in the mirror and adding a song to it. Or like, I just think they're so weird, whatever. But I did it because I tried it and I'm on line 3. So I went back to my chart and this time I focused on something different. This time I focused on, instead of, looking at where I was influenced, I looked at what is my energy. So this is what I've started calling the quadfecta. And the quadfecta is our conscious sun, our unconscious Mars, and our 2 Plutos, because honestly, I couldn't pick just one. I find them both to be important. So I went back to my body graph and I said, what's here? What am I missing? What was the deal with my shadow report, right? Why wasn't it selling? What was wrong with me? I came back to myself and my own energy, shutting everything out. I took a break from Instagram, right? I unfollowed these people because I recognized they were getting into my psyche. My unconscious Mars is in gate 14.1. 14 a lot of times is money, right? But the line 1 is money isn't everything. I've known this obviously, but seeing it from this lens of I feel like I'm doing something wrong hit a little bit different. So I recognized from my unconscious Mars that I wasn't specifically motivated by the money. I sat down and I asked myself, what would it feel like to make $25,000 a month, right? Like whatever, throw out a random number just from shadow reports. I mean, that feels good, but does it? And I realized that there was a lot of fear and a lot of feelings coming up that was like, but that's what would I do then? Like, that's boring. Like, that sounds fun in theory. And like, I see all these girls and they're like running to Starbucks and they're in their, Range Rovers and they look like they're having fun. But that's not who I am, right? Like, that's not, I have all of those motors. I have, all of these different parts of my chart that are like, this is great and I want it and I want to experience it, but I want it in a different way. I want it in my way. And I think that's the part that we miss a lot of times, which is why we're focused on being the good girl, because we think that that works, because it looks like that works for this person, that works for these Instagram influencers. We never fully see everything, right? But it looks like that works and there's certainty there. Well, I know that that'll make me happy because that makes her happy. I know that I want to be a good mother because that makes my mother happy, right? Like whatever that thing is. So I recognize from my unconscious Mars that I wasn't specifically motivated by the money, but what I really craved, what I really wanted was space, peace, time to be creative, to create something new, something I was passionate about. And I didn't want to have to compromise my time or my energy to create something I didn't want to, right? So I probably should pull up my chart because it might be easier if I show you guys. Although you've probably all know my chart by now. So when I say the quadfecta, I'm talking about this conscious sun. So mine is in 1.1. Our unconscious Mars, which is over here, mine is 14.1. Unconscious Pluto, which mine is in 50.4, and conscious Pluto, which is 28.1. So let me get back to this. Okay. So my unconscious Mars in 14.1 is, yes, it's money, but it's also, I don't compromise. We don't compromise on what's important. So what's important? What's the transformation? What's truth? It is Pluto. My Pluto is in 50, which is all about values. It's all about living a different life, a life that might not fit in the box. It's doing it differently. It's allowing my values to lead. And then 28, which is it's passion, it's shadow work, it's purpose, right? So the recognition that what I really wanted was the space and the time for this creativity, right? My one, and I encourage everyone to do a ton of research into their quadfecta. But my gate 1 cannot be creative without time and space. And time might be a month. It might be 2 months. I don't fucking know. Like we don't know until it happens, right? It's like that mutative pulse of the individual energy. So I recognize that my values, the things that made me, again, do not match my environment or what I am allowing myself to look at. So the reason why I'm pointing this out is because I think we have this idea that if we decondition from our parents and from those beliefs and from those values, we come into ourselves, but we are constantly being conditioned by everything around us. Like, I want to say the devil is everywhere, but whatever. I don't know when I turned religious. So Whitney's like, I don't know what's happening to you. Um, even in Instagram, right? Even in Netflix, even in the music that we listen to, even in the things that we watch, even in the friends that we talk to, we're being conditioned all the time. So it's so important for all of us to spend some time alone and understand, recognize what is actually me, and come back to the body graph. What is actually me and what isn't? Do I actually want this? Do I actually desire this? So I considered that maybe focusing primarily on the shadow report was actually a vision that was too small. That it was, again, me putting myself in a box that wasn't correct and it was too small. So I asked myself, what's a bigger vision? Can I cast a bigger vision? What would feel even better? And I gave this exercise to someone else this week because we get so focused on what's right in front of us and what we think that we want that we forget what's the bigger vision. Can I dream even bigger? Can I look out into the future? It might not be tomorrow, it might not be the next day, but this is something that I am moving towards. And when we can have that vision, then our values can more easily align with it, right? Like I can say, well, does this match my vision? Does this, me working 8 hours on this thing over here, is that for the vision, or is that just me distracting, right? So I asked the question, what else was here? What else did the universe have in store for me that I wasn't even considering because I was so damn focused on something small? And could I also hold it lightly, right? Allow it to change. Turns out that when we give in to conditioning and expectations of others, it's a life that is far too small for who we really are. Again, my son in gate one requires a lot of space, time, peace. So I cast this bigger vision aside and I left it up to the universe, right? Like, show me what it is. I don't really know. And it's okay to not know, right? It's okay to not have it all figured out. I don't really know. Show me. And for me, that's so fun. I don't know if it's because I'm a generator and I'm like, yes, give me something to respond to. But like, it's so fun to leave it up to the universe. Show me, show me. So I kind of pushed away the shadow report thing and I stopped trying to make reels for shadow report. And I just said, I'm in a holding pattern. I'm just going to wait. I'm just going to wait and see what happens. So I was talking to the group, our current round of the human design shadow training, and I was letting them know that we're opening a new round. And if they want to become affiliates, let me know if you know anyone that would want to join our next round. So Sharon had reached out and she said, I don't really know anyone that wants to join because they don't want it to be in their business. They'd rather learn human design shadow for personal healing. And my sacral went wild. And I know this is like so cliche to say, like it was the sacral, yes. But even Whitney knows this. I've been talking about doing human design shadow, but just for self, right? Without the business. Because honestly, I don't even really like the business part of it. Like, I don't like teaching the business part of it. Like, I don't know, you do you. I don't know. Because clearly what works for me doesn't work for everyone else. And what everyone else tells you to do does not work for me. So I can show you the different things I've tried, and I can show you all the different paths I took and how I did it and what could possibly work for you. But I think that business is so much more personal than we make it seem. I don't think I know there's not just one way to do it. So when Sharon brought up human design shadow for self-healing, I was like, this is it. Right? Like this is our next step. Like if we can create this huge global vision around using human design shadow for self-healing, wherever that leads, it doesn't matter, right? It could be business, it could be marriage, it could be whatever you want. We don't need to focus on the business part. So we brainstormed HDSS. We brainstormed, how it's going to go, how we can give people the most support. And again, like this is where if I had turned and said, okay, well, what have all the business coaches told me to do? What is everybody else doing? I would have missed it because everybody else is not doing pods like we're doing. Everybody else does not give the same kind of Voxer support that we give. Nobody else is doing shadow docs, and shadow docs have been transformational in so many people's lives. So we formed a plan. And we sold out Sharon sold out her pod in a week, which I did nothing for. So it was like my dream that I had, my dream to do nothing, my my goal of just creating more space in my life and just room to breathe. I was so focused on that coming just from my shadow reports. It has to be from me being a good girl, right? From doing these shadow reports. But as soon as I released that and allowed something better to come, it was even better than I could have ever imagined. Like, did I know that this is where we were going to go? I had no idea. And it happened so quickly, too. Like, it happened so fast to the point where I released the shadow report, that needing to be the vision. I came back to my quadfecta. Well, how else can it look? What are the values that I'm still compromising on? What are the things that I still am not allowing myself to have because someone somewhere told me I couldn't? And then it happened, right? And in a bigger and better way. And now we're brainstorming things that are so different and feel so fun. The point of this story and the other story and all the stories is that when we just allow ourselves to be ourselves and to want what we want and desire what we want and allow that, even that vision to be like yes or something better, right? Like, I'm not attached to it. And that's the point of getting everything you want, right? And that's the point of manifestation, is that when we can be unattached to it, if I make $25,000 from the shadow reports or not, I'm going to be okay, because maybe there is something better. Maybe there is something better. And when I really leaned into that and detached from it and proved it to myself in my body graph, and this is the magic link that we have, right? Like, we have access to our body graphs. We can prove it. We can prove we are worthy of it. We can prove we deserve it because it's in the body graph. And when you become unattached to what it needs to look like, right, to being the good girl, then you give yourself permission to be so much more than that. So we are running HDSS. There are more pods open if you want to learn this system and all the systems, right? And everything that we teach in human design shadow, how to do the deconditioning work, how to do the shadow work, how to do the quadfecta. Like, we dive deep into everyone's chart, because it works. And this way of making money feels so much more aligned, because now I can create more and do something different, but it has a purpose, and it has this specific purpose, right? To like help other people do the same thing, which feels so much better than just like sitting on my couch and Netflixing while a million people buy the shadow report. Like, that's great too, but I noticed that it was starting to cause way too much friction and frustration for it to be correct. Okay. And I wanted to do it in, thank you, Whitney. Whitney put the link in the chat. I wanted to do my story quickly in a half an hour, and I did it so that we could answer any questions. So does anybody have questions about anything? Feel free to put it in the chat, or you can unmute yourselves. Some takeaways or some things that I would maybe, go back to your journal about is, where am I still being conditioned by the outside world? Where am I still not allowing myself to be me? And again, I go back to the quadfecta. Like, I know I said before that I don't look at the conscious sun a lot, and I don't. But when it's in relation to the unconscious Mars and the Plutos, I think it creates a really nice story about who I am and what my potential is and what I am deserving of and what can be a big part of my life if I allow it. Alicia said, I love remembering that my frustration and anxiety is a sign rather than something that I need to fix or change. It will change when I listen and pay attention. Yeah, 100%. Like, just, like in the story, when the message was, I gave you this, like, I gave you this restlessness, I gave you this frustration so that you would listen, so that you would notice that something was off and rework it. But instead, you just pushed harder through it. Instead, you just said, no, no, this must be wrong. Like, no, this needs to be fixed. There's a part of me that needs to be fixed because this is wrong. I can print that on a poster for you, Sharon. So glad that resonated. Um, I think that having that perspective on our feelings and on these on our body, like those things that like we've learned are wrong, right? Like if I have anxiety, take a Xanax. If I have depression, take a, I don't know, what do you take for depression? If I have these feelings that I don't know how to feel, just drink them away, right? Like if I'm feeling restless, I'm gonna eat a piece of cake. I don't know. Like we do all of these different things to try to diminish these feelings that we've been taught are wrong and bad and shouldn't be there, and we try to push them down in so many different ways, but the truth is that many times they are messages telling us that something's not right, something's off. What if we listened? And I was right before this call, I did an interview with someone for her podcast, and we talked about all of this, right? Like we talked about not trusting the body and how we learned not to trust the body because I have pain or I have anxiety or it feels like this, and therefore I can no longer trust myself. And how hard it really is to sit with it, to sit in it. And it's not something that we're taught how to do as children. We have to teach ourselves how to do it. We have to do something different to create something different, right? Like if nothing changes, nothing changes. Right. Well, if no one has anything else, I just hope that this was helpful. I just like I have a big message to share, and it's more than just like a few Instagram stories. And it's more than just an email. And I was like, what can I do that's like a little bit different and allows other people to get involved? So glad that this was helpful. Good. I'm glad you liked it. I'd love to see you weave someone's quadfecta together if you feel like playing in a chart. Oh, thanks, Whitney, for putting me on the spot. Okay. Okay, Dina, go ahead, say whatever. Yeah, go for it. Unmute.
I have talked to Whitney before, and the timing wasn't right. And I don't know if the timing is right now either, but just what's really coming up for me is I really resonated with absolutely everything you said. And I do firmly believe that all of my answers lie in the shadow work that I'm afraid to dive into. But it was interesting because I'm in the opposite of you, so I have 1 and 2 in my body. So I guess what, and I don't even know how to put this into words. So this is my self projector trying to project it out. But essentially there's this frustration of being patient and waiting for the right opportunity and responding to, the invitations and all of those things. But on the same token, I get so impatient and frustrated. And it's like, you have to do something different. But when the opportunity doesn't arise, it's just like, I'm sure this is all like in my shadow work. And if I just like took the one step forward, it would answer all of the questions that I have questions for, right? Does that even make sense of what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
absolutely. It makes sense. That gate one, if you ever read the Gene Keys, if you read Gene Key 1, that will make a lot of sense to you because it requires patience. Lots of patience, lots of space, lots of time for something new. So think about it as like the individual energy. So individual energy is very mutative. It's a spark. It just like happens. Sometimes you don't know when it's going to happen. When it's on, and you feel good and you're like, oh, I have all the ideas. I know what to do. And when it's off, it's off. And it's like, fuck, this is depressing. When is that mutation going to come again? Where is that idea? Where is that opportunity? And that's a wave of its own, right? Like it's kind of like the emotional wave, but it's different in it's different in how it feels. But it requires patience. And I'm not saying don't throw spaghetti against the wall to see what sticks. I think everybody should do it, whether you're a line 3 or not, but especially line 3s and 6s, throw spaghetti against the wall and see what sticks. Play around, like let it be fun, let it be an experiment, let it be, you know, for me, it's fun to have like an Excel spreadsheet of what works and what doesn't work. Other people don't like Excel, and that's fine. But if you make it more so information to see, is this right for me, rather than how did I fuck this up? Or I'm still here waiting, or this isn't happening for me. What am I doing wrong? It gets to be fun. It gets to be adventurous. It gets to be life. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I still get restless too. I'm like, well, when is it my time? And, like for me, when I start doing shadow work, and I know for a lot of people it happens this way too, the deeper I go, the more shit hits the fan. The deeper I go, like Whitney knows, did like a different money mindset. It's not even money mindset. It was like really deep money shadow work because I really wanted to clear this part up. And it got really, really bad. And it got really dark. And even Whitney reminded me, she's like, remember, this is what happens when we do shadow work. It shows up in our environment. And I said to myself, like, this is the place where everybody stops because this is bad and this is not getting better and this shit does not work. So everybody quits and they go back to their old behaviors. But I said, no, I'm going to go one step further. I'm going to go even further. I'm going to hold that tension a little bit longer. I'm going to let everything get as bad as it can get. And I still know I'm going to be okay. And then on the other side of that was this, honestly, beyond my dreams. So it's like, how much tension can we hold? So for you, it might be the patience. How much tension can I hold? How patient can I be? Just when I think I can't be any more patient, I'm going to be a little bit more patient because this is where everybody quits.
Yeah. Thank you.
Welcome. Thanks for asking.
Hi.
Hi.
I literally was just in the bath, so that's why I yeah, this is like, I don't know. I love working out of the bathtub. But so my unconscious Mars is in gate 37, right? And I've been just trying to really understand like what that means. I mean, I know it's like the archetype of like the mother and like that, but just wondering if you had any other downloads, or I like the way that you look at things.
Okay, I'm gonna pull up. This is what I always do I'm like, I'm not gonna recreate the wheel right now. I'm just gonna
Yeah.
my own shadow report and look at what I have written for gate 37. And then I know we have a few people here that have done the human design shadow training with me. So if any of you want to add anything, you're always welcome to do that. So just give me 1 second. So we know that the unconscious Mars is multiple things, right? It can give us a lot of information. So one, it's the shadow genius. It holds our creative potential. it is the core wound, and it is our generational trauma. So it's the core wound, some of our biggest lessons that we're here to learn. And it also holds generational trauma, which, because it's in the body, it's unconscious. It comes from our parents, our grandparents, our line. What's the word? Hereditary. It's hereditary, whatever, our genetic line. So as the core wound, what I have for this is, you may have learned from an early age that if you do what others expect of you, and if you try to please them, fawning, right, in whatever way possible, you will be able to maintain the peace and the harmony in the household. This is a hell of a lot of responsibility for a child, and now as an adult as well. How often do you find yourself people pleasing or managing others' emotions with your actions? This core wound is motivated by a need to take care of others and subconsciously abandon the self. So as potential generational ancestral connection, this is inauthentic giving, people pleasing, and being ruled by your emotions instead of the heart. Those are just some of the generational wound themes of this gate. Another aspect is the hardened heart that projects its own fears out onto everyone and everything else. Were your ancestors forced to be hard, cold, and controlling, or cruel in order to survive? So again, we're looking at survival mechanisms when it comes to generational trauma and how other people may have learned to survive, and how does that relate to you? So this is, again, like, you can look at the human design definition, you can look at the gene keys definition, and you're going to get a lot of different information. But the way that I would perceive 37 is, how am I compromising myself in order to fit in? How am I people pleasing in order to keep the peace? And what is this is tribal energy. So like, you're naturally a giver, but also a taker. So the part of tribal energy that a lot of people don't understand is that it's not just taking care of the tribe. It's not just like nurturing and like, I love you guys, and giving you all of my resources. What tribal energy does is that it also has this like little shadow piece inside of it that's possessive. And it's saying, if I'm giving you this, you're mine. I own you. You owe me this. So it's like this unspoken about expectation. So what I would ask for you to do is to look at your 37 and to look at your relationships and ask yourself, where am I putting these expectations on people? Because I was a good girl, because I gave them what they wanted, because I pleased them. And now I expect them to return it maybe in this way or another way. And how is this creating bitterness? So the shadow genius here is tribal energy, friendship, family, nurture, and community. Your creativity and love and companionship acts as the glue that holds things together, especially when you're recognized by others, as this is a projected gate. So Richard Rudd said, the family unit is the most powerful crucible of love through which humanity will be transformed. The true power in this creative potential comes through living directly out of your heart and letting everything else be secondary to that. So I would look at the rest of your chart, obviously, too, but the main themes here would be people pleasing and expectations. And your creative genius being more in the heart. What does my heart want when I push everything else aside, right? Like all of these expectations, all of these conditionings, where does my heart lead me?
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Is that helpful?
Yeah, super
Okay.
duper.
Good. Whitney just posted the shadow report. Yeah, there's definitely more information on that there. I don't really talk about the quadfecta in the shadow report. I do talk about it in the shadow portal, which is like the support to the shadow report. It is something I want to add, but it's a lot of work, so that'll take time. All right, cool. Well, if no one has anything else they want to ask, thank you all for coming. If you have questions, I think you guys all know where I am on Instagram. Like, I'm happy to answer any questions, or if it's something longer that you want me to riff about, I'm happy to do another one of these or just a podcast episode. Thank you guys. I hope this was helpful. I hope you take something away from it, or at least go back and look at your quadfecta.
Thank you.
You're so welcome. Thank you. Have a great weekend.